Let's bring in Mark Leibovich. He's a CBS News political contributor and a chief national correspondent for the New York Times Magazine. So, Mark, let's begin with this news surrounding Jared Kushner, which the president and the White House are pushing back hard on. Talk about the impact of this particular advisor, not to mention family member, who's now being implicated in this investigation.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely been implicated. There's no question about it. I mean, the last maybe 5 or 6 days have been given over almost entirely in the news media to his involvement or possible involvement in some channel to Russia. What's curious about this is twofold. One, I think it's clear at this point that there were a great number of communications between him and either Russian officials or Russian business people. And I mean, the other part of this obviously is it's hard to fire your son-in-law, and his role from the beginning has been kind of ambiguous, except that people have assumed it to be somewhat all-powerful. He's talked about having a portfolio that has to do with reinventing government, that has to do with the Middle East, that has to do with any number of things, and obviously, I mean, he's a first among equal in the Trump camp, and there's so much volatility there, you would assume, or people have assumed to this point, that he would have been one constant. But we're going to see where this goes. And I mean, also within the structure of the White House, he has his own team also, as does his wife Ivanka. And you know, it's just another element of the Kremlinology that just seems to dominate this story.
So let's talk a little bit about the staffing shakeup. Not really a shakeup yet. What we know is that one person's out, Mike Dubke. He had not been there very long, but now we have these other names that are being floated around. But can you put this in context? Is this normal this early in an administration?
It is normal in that there is quite often, especially for outsiders coming to town who have no Washington experience and who have staffs that don't have a lot of White House experience, for there to be some initial friction after a few months. I mean, it certainly happened with the Clinton administration in the first months or first year of their administration in 1993. What's unique about this is here you have a cycling of old campaign hands, quote-unquote Trump loyalists who, for whatever reason, never either were fired from the campaign in the case of Corey Lewandowski, or in other cases, people who didn't go into the administration immediately after the campaign. So, I mean, there is this sort of sense, one, of this incredibly tumultuous beginning to the administration, but also, you know, I guess you'd call it maybe a bit of a shuffling of the deck because so many of these figures are known anyway, and it's unclear if they were ever out to begin with.
Mark, the president has been on a tweet storm since he came back from his first trip abroad. Yesterday, he tweeted out that whenever you see the word sources say in the fake news media and they don't mention names, it is very possible that those sources don't exist but are made up by fake writers. Fake news is the enemy. Today, he tweeted out, or he retweeted, a link from Fox and Friends, from Fox News, which says, anonymous source says Jared Kushner did nothing wrong. Is the president trying to have his cake and eat it too?
Yeah, of course. I mean, he does seem to be making an effort, at least in the last 48 hours, to combat any sense that, you know, when the president comes back, we're going to try to put a handle and try to control his social media use. I mean, he seems to be pushing back just by virtue of the volume of tweets we've seen in the last couple of days. Look, I mean, I think one thing I would wonder about is, you know, you can't have it both ways. I mean, either all fake news, I mean, doesn't exist, or these leaks need to be gotten to the bottom of, and we have to sort of see who they are and prosecute them and so forth. I mean, I think the larger picture is here, is this, or is there ever a point of diminishing returns where people just sort of tune out the tweets and it becomes part of the larger kind of eye roll of whether you ask, you know, is this president really serious? Is he really going to lead and get down to work?
All right, so before we let you go, Mark, I got to ask you about some foreign policy stuff. The president tweeted about Germany this morning, writing, quote, we have a massive trade deficit with Germany, plus they pay far less than they should in NATO and military. Very bad for U.S. This will change. Two-part question here. He's said this before about Germany. How valid is it that we have a horrible trade deficit with them? And what do you make of this sort of growing rift between the White House and Germany?
Well, I mean, it's not just Germany. It's a lot of Western Europe. And, I mean, I think this trip really laid bare the sort of growing divisions between countries like France and Germany. I mean, obviously, very, very strong allies of the U.S., you know, in recent history. And, you know, a possibly, you know, greater divide with Russia, although obviously Trump's alignment with Russia is pretty well documented. I think what you know, when you read something like this, it looks very much like a base play. I mean, this is exactly the kind of language not only that he's used before, but particularly used when he's trying to talk to his base, sort of make, you know, people who voted for him and who still support him aware that, you know, trade deficits, you know, which is sort of code in some ways for your American jobs, is something that I care foremost about. And also, this is reinforcing the America First message, which is to say, I don't care about traditional alliances. I care about what I think is in the best interest of America and the American people. And that, I think, is a reiteration to the people who were warm to that message and who voted for him.
Yep, when things get a little topsy-turvy, he always goes back to his base. Mark Leibovich of the New York Times Magazine, thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.